Greetings, everyone. It's Trey Jadlow here. I'm here on this fifth day of May, the Cinco de Mayo 2023, and I'm here with my new friend Scott. Is your last name Hootling or Hootaling?
It's hoteling.
Hotailing. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's very
It's
nice to meet
Dutch.
you. Okay. And I just met him a little bit ago on Ben Watkins' page on Twitter, and Ben had made a statement about Um, he sometimes will criticize his own community, actually fairly often, and basically saying it just because you say you lack a belief doesn't mean you don't have justification because you're still making a hypothesis, you're still making some kind of claim. You need to be able to give justification for it. And so I made some point to comment to that, and then you encouraged me to go find Forrest Valkai, which I don't know, Aaron Ra, who I'm trying to get exactly right now, and he is not. He said I don't run from anyone, but he's not responding. And Jimmy A. Snow, who is Jimmy A. Snow?
He is friends with Aaron and a few of those other
Okay,
YouTubers. Yeah.
okay. So the only one I know is Aaron Ra, really. And I'm delighted. I have actually invited him. This is the second or third time, and he's declined. And then he says he never declined, so I don't know what that means. But anyway, so you invited me to go talk to them. I said, no, I'm talking about you. Why don't you come on and have a conversation? You said, okay, I guess I'll do it. And so you did. So thank you very much. I appreciate your audience. Would you mind? I'll tell you about myself, but would you tell me a little bit about yourself as it relates to your maybe religious views, your atheism, what kind of atheism you hold to, or whatever that might be.
Sure. I I grew up in a conservative Christian cult. Um,
What kind was it?
um, I grew up Mormon.
Okay,
I'll just say it.
that's
It'll just be
interesting. So
it'll
you're
just be
from
easier with the transparency. Yeah.
so you have Dutch roots, but your family was Mormon. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean the Dutch. That's just you know how Mormons are about genealogy. So my parents have tracked everything. We know the whole
Hmm.
family line, who came to Ellis Island, all that. So that's all that is. Just the name is Dutch, but yeah,
Okay,
my parents met at BYU, and
okay, interesting. And then so when did you leave your religious perspective?
um, it was a process.
Hmm.
But it started in 2009, 2010. I would have been 19 and 20. I did go on a mission for the church, like
Okay.
most good Mormons do.
Did you go 2
And
year?
no, I came home early. I
And and where did you go?
uh, Bogota, Colombia.
Oh, okay. I've,
Yeah,
I've been to Central America. Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. And so why did you come home early?
Um, that is that's kind of complicated, but
If it's too complicated, that's fine. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's uh, starting to struggle and question a little bit, and just felt like I was wasting my time. I felt like I hadn't made the choice to go. Not that I specifically didn't want to, just family pressure, social
sure.
pressure, everything. By never making a decision, of course, I ended up there.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so I realized that's not where I wanted to be. Came home, and over the course of the next few years, slowly came to realize that I mean, first it was, Mormonism specific things kind of started to fall apart for me. And then over the years that got a little broader, and until I realized, hey, I think I'm an atheist. So,
Okay,
and
that's
that's
interesting.
been years now.
Okay, so well, let me tell you a little bit about myself so I can
Sure.
reciprocate there. I'm a born again Christian. I'm of the Baptistic persuasion. I've been a Christian 30, almost 36 years. I'm 56. I'll be 57 in June. I live in the Kansas City area. I'm a dental lab technician, so I make teeth for a living. Um, and sadly, I'm divorced. I've got 6 children, ages 33 down to 20, 3 boys, 3 girls, and all but 2 live here. 2 are in California. 2 of my girls in California. And I enjoy. I enjoy thinking about things. I might be described as kind of somewhat of a fanatic for reason as it relates to religion. I feel like we're living in an age of fideism, of just, blind faith, and the mind is not valued in the religious community. I would even say in society, period. And so I have a passion to recapture a paradigm of loving the mind and loving actually philosophy as well as theology and thinking about things deeply, so that I can live the good life. Something else I was going to say. What was it? I don't know. I've been engaging atheists about probably 2009, probably 13 years now or more, online. But anyway, that's about me. So I found it interesting that you described yourself first as formerly as a member of a cult. So you would describe Mormonism as an aberration from the Christian faith, or why did you say that?
Um, actually, so an aberration from Christianity, no. I generally, even now, I still disagree when people say Mormons aren't Christians. I think we start to get into some of that territory of who defines it and what and why. But for me, what it boils down to is they do believe in Christ. They do believe He's the Redeemer. They do. So I consider Mormons to be Christians.
Oh, okay. So So you're just speaking about maybe Christianity as a whole is somewhat kind of a cultic move because Mormonism is a polytheistic religion. Christianity is a monotheistic religion.
Technically, sure. Yeah, you could call it a polytheistic. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
So
it's
you
not.
agree that
It's not the
Christianity
Trinity.
No, but you agree that the Shema or Hebrews, I mean Deuteronomy 6:4 I think says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." So there's one self-existent, and metaphysically, Mormonism makes no sense whatsoever. Polytheism makes no sense whatsoever. There's got to be an ultimate reality. You can't have competing ultimate realities. Otherwise, there would be no way to differentiate them, and a differentiation would provide one being better than the other, and it just doesn't. The whole thing collapses, so it doesn't make sense. So that's why I would say Mormonism is not viable, both philosophically and theologically.
Why would? How did you? Hold on. Let me open up a notepad. I'm gonna probably use this pretty liberally here. That'll just be a good idea. So, because I want to be able to keep track of things I want to respond to.
Sure.
But why? There's. I have no argument that Mormonism starts to fall apart pretty quickly when you take a look at it. I mean, my reasoning.
There's no archaeological evidence whatsoever to back it up.
Yes,
I've got the letter from the
it's one of
Smithsonian Institute.
Yeah, it's one of the most demonstrably false religions that there is.
Okay.
Just about Mormon specific. I mean, obviously, I'm coming that from a different angle, and what I saw and heard and was taught and was told was truth and all that growing up, right? So that's a little different. But the way you worded that, and you can correct me if I'm getting this wording wrong, but that we can't have, what was it, different possibilities, different
the ultimate reality has to be
realities.
one, and I think actually even Socrates and Plato and Aristotle understood this. This is just by reason alone, you can't have a polytheism doesn't work, because if the ultimate reality is the ultimate reality, then it would be the perfection of everything that is. Okay?
Why does that preclude the Godhead being three separate people?
You mean personal distinctions?
Yes.
Okay, that's not. I'm not talking about an essence. I'm talking about persons. I'm talking about essence.
Okay.
So those are different categories. The personal relations within the Godhead of the Trinity are not essential distinctions, but relational distinctions.
Okay, I'm following.
So if it is true that it's three gods that come together to make one, then that's not monotheism, that's polytheism. And that's, some Christians actually hold the form that they call it social Trinitarianism, and it's heresy. It's a new term. It's called partialism. It's like one part God, one part Father. I mean, one part Father, one part Son, one part Holy Spirit. The two come together to make the one. But that's not the historic and it's not the biblical definition of what God is. You gotta make really fine distinctions when talking about theology, and that's where a lot of people get it wrong, especially contemporary Christianity. And Joseph Smith wasn't even in the same, literally in the same planet. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it's not even. He's a good storyteller. I mean, that's about it. All right. So from your perspective, though, you would say that there is no God, but you do agree that there is such a thing as contingent existence, like
I so
yourself.
uh, let's start with the first one. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure if I would consider myself a Gnostic atheist or an agnostic atheist. I don't know if I'm a hard no, there is no God versus a
You just don't see any evidence.
yeah. Um, I probably generally do lean more towards the Gnostic, the hard no, that there is no God. But it is ultimately, I think, based on I have no reason to think that there is a God.
Okay.
Everything works just fine. To put I know that's been used a million times, but that's where
Okay.
I would generally land myself.
Okay. So are you familiar with Ben Watkins at all?
A little bit. I mean, I know I'm just a guy, but I am relatively well read.
Okay. Well, I've had a couple of conversations with Ben, and he refuses to talk to me now. He will not talk to me for his life. Didn't go so well for him. He's a very nice person. I really like him a lot as a person, but he's not too analytical on these things. But anyway, so we'll go back to the original statement that Ben was making. He was saying basically, yes, the burden of proof is going to be on me because I'm making the assertion that God exists. But the burden of proof is on all parties if they make any claims about reality so whatsoever. For example, Scott, you have a burden to demonstrate justification or reason for your own existence as a contingent dependent being. And so if it is true that you exist, then you have to give a justification for your own existence. You can't say that you made yourself, right?
Sure.
Because you would have to bend before you were. So how do you do
True.
that?
I mean, that depends on how far you want to. I mean, I was made by my parents. They were made by their parents. We start getting into
Well,
generations
you're
and
just pushing it back though.
evolution.
You're
It's
not answering the
yeah. I mean
question.
that because what's the answer? I didn't make myself. My parents made me. Right. I mean
Okay.
that's the first immediate thing.
Right. And you would agree that all existence can't be dependent independently, right?
Living beings or just existence in general.
Contingent being, anything that changes is contingent in nature. Are you familiar with that term contingent?
How would you define it? Let me.
Well, I would just say
eh,
it's something that is not necessary in existence. It could either exist or not exist. It denotes the fact that it is not self-existent. You've got two types of being. You've got self-existent being, and you've got dependent or contingent being.
Okay.
And contingent being, anything that changes is always going to be an effect. Therefore, it cannot be the ultimate reality because it is dependent on something beyond itself in order to be what it is.
Okay.
So
I'm
the entirety of existence cannot be dependent, changing being independently because you're violating the law of identity. You're saying something is what it is and the opposite of what it is, which is also the violation of law of non-contradiction. So um, you cannot rationally say that all existence is dependent existence because if you're familiar with the principle of causality, right?
yes.
Bertrand Russell is right.
Yes.
Yeah, he misunderstood his entire life. He misunderstood the concept of causality. He defined causality as everything requires a cause. And if everything requires a cause, then what caused God? That was his big argument. And it's amazing that he was a man of such prodigious intellect. He was, very, very intelligent, but he completely misunderstood that. He got it from John Stuart Mill, who also misunderstood it. The principle of causality does not say that everything must have a cause. It says every effect must have a cause. And essentially, that's everything that changes must have a cause. And you cannot have an infinite regress of contingent beings going back for eternity, because at some point everything is potential before it's actual. All right, so I am potentially bald. I'm moving more and more toward the actuality of the state of baldness. And so but I start out potentially something, and then I'm actually that. And so in the ultimate sense, if something is pure potentiality, it's really nothing. This is Aristotelian thought. He said everything is reduced from potentiality to actuality. And you cannot have something start out as pure potentiality, then it would have to create itself out of nothing. So if there is such a thing as dependent existence, you, the inquirer, I don't even care if you're real. I don't care if my computer's real. It doesn't matter if anything that I see is real. But I know that I exist because I'm the one that's asking the question. You're familiar with cogito ergo sum with Descartes?
Yes.
Yeah, he said basically, what can I not doubt? What truth can be truth that's indubitable? And he said, well, in order for me to doubt my existence, I have to think. In order to think, therefore, I'd have to be. So we know for sure that everything is not an illusion. Now, it's possible you're an illusion, but I know that I'm not an illusion because I'm the one asking the question. And somebody will say everything's an illusion. I always say, well, who's asking the question then? And so we know that we exist, and we know that we are dependent in our existence. And are you familiar with the principle of modus ponens?
No.
It says if A implies B, and A is granted, then B necessarily follows. Okay? So for example, if I exist and I require something to give me my being, then it necessarily follows that something outside of myself that is actual gives me my being.
Don't you first have to demonstrate that something is required for your being?
Yeah.
All right, aren't we making a leap at that point?
Okay, stop breathing for 5 minutes.
I could.
and you would die. Okay, we could test that really quickly. You are dependent. You're not self-existent. You agree with that, right?
In general, sure, but I'm not sure the way you're using it. Right.
Well, it's another way of saying you're a contingent being. There are two types of being. I said self-existent being, dependent being. Another philosophical term is necessary being that cannot not be. And then you've got contingent being, which either could exist or not exist, but it is dependent upon the necessary being in order to have what it is, because it cannot give itself its own being, because it would violate the law of non-contradiction, have to be before it is.
What would be, outside of a god as an example, what would be another example of an independent being? Or is everything else a contingent being?
I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, if you're saying that...
Is there any other example of an independent being? Or are you saying that everything is contingent except for...
It is logically necessary that there be one singular, immaterial, necessary being that is rational and is mind, because you agree that there's such a thing as abstract mathematics, which is just, symbolic logic.
Yeah, 2 + 2 = 5 for extremely large volumes of 2. Yeah. There's all kinds of crazy.
Okay, and so you agree to the laws of thought as well, right?
Sure.
Do you agree that they are laws of thought?
Sure.
Okay, so those and laws of thought are something that is only mental, right? Now you can apply it to the world around us, but it precedes material, and it is unchanging, and it is a product of mind.
Can you repeat that for me?
Yeah, the laws of logic and mathematics are objective. They are unchanging. They are products of mind. They're mental. They're not physical. Like you can't weigh the number 2 in the abstract sense. Now you can, you can instantiate it or you can see it applied to the world.
Sure. Yeah, I generally agree with those.
So if it is true that they are necessarily mental concepts, then there must be an objective, unchanging mind that links to the laws of thought and mathematics itself.
Okay. So I've got a couple notes, things that you just said that I want to tackle. So
Sure.
I don't necessarily have the problem with someone making the argument that there must be a creator,
Hmm.
right? That okay. I can understand that. I can tackle that. But you take that a step further. It must be one being. It must be immaterial. Are two of the things. Why must it be one, and why must it be immaterial?
Okay. Well, let's start with the material. Matter, by definition, is changeable because it's matter energy, right?
Sure.
Okay, so then it can't be the ultimate reality. So it must transcend matter in order to be necessary. Because matter is defined by change, and change is necessarily an attribute of contingent being. That makes sense?
It makes sense. I'm not sure if I agree with it. Was the first part of that, and I'm sorry. I keep alternating between like listening pretty hard and trying to take notes.
Sure. No, it's
And
fine.
why does matter being changing? Let me think how to
When
ask
something
this.
changes, it's an effect, right?
Sure.
Okay, so the effect can't be a cause. It can in a different relationship, but it can't be ultimate reality because there's something outside of it that brought it to this new state of actuality. And the thing that moved upon it, that brought it to that new state of actuality itself had to be actual in nature. It could not have been potential. So you can't have an infinite regress of anything that changes is dependent. It moved to a new state of being in and of itself. It's not what it was before it was. Now, you can say continuity of being in some ways, but it's still not exactly the same thing.
So, but we see examples of things that, the cause doesn't have to be sentient. It doesn't have to be intelligent. Two stars collide. There's going to be an effect.
Right.
That doesn't mean someone pushed the two stars into each other.
That's
Right?
right. But if the star starts creating philosophical societies, then there had to be a mind behind it to give that. There's a principle called the principle of proportionate causality. Something can only cause something in something else what it itself has. Like I cannot impart the gift of flying like a bird to my children because I don't have that. Rocks cannot create philosophical societies. Do you agree with that?
Sure. Rocks cannot do that.
Yeah. So there's a causal relationship where the agent that brings about the effect must have either the actual ability or I can't remember the terms of it, the formal ability, like when you make a cake mix, there's no property of leavening in flour itself or in baking powder itself. But when you mix them together with water, you get leavening. The baking powder expands. So it doesn't immediately have that capacity, but it does have the virtual capacity, I think is a term for that, to have that thing. So you've got to have, if there's something that's giving rise to purpose in any way, it must have that capacity within itself to be purposive. The philosophical term is teleology. It's the Greek word telos, means a goal or an end to it. So like we're having this conversation with the purpose of something, which is hopefully enlightenment, okay, to learn something. And if this universe is a purposive universe, then there must be some eternal purposer. Because, like I said, stars colliding don't create purpose.
So, but I feel like the key word there is, you said if the universe, so we need to demonstrate that that's the case before we can get to the then, that there is
Are you
a
purposing to have
purpose.
this conversation?
Sure, but that's not
Okay,
what you,
then we're done. I just
that
proved
doesn't.
it.
You didn't prove that there is a purposer for the universe as
Well,
you
can
worded it.
can can unintentionality imbibe intention in you without violating the law of identity?
This is something I wanted to tackle that you said a moment ago, and I am going to answer this. So you said I use the examples of two stars. You know, I said if two stars collide, that doesn't mean that someone pushed them, and you said yes, but if a star starts making conscious societies, then and we went into that.
Mhm.
But the thing is, we do have a star, and we know how it formed and how the solar system was formed and where we came from. So
How
why
do you
can
know
we
that?
not? How do I know which part? Because
How do you know
there's
where
a
we
lot.
came
I
from?
mean,
How do you know where we came from?
which are we talking about? Evolution? Are you talking about abiogenesis? Are we talking about the
Whatever it is
formation
that
of
you're
the solar
referring to.
system? I mean, kind of touching on all of it. I mean, we know how the solar system was formed. We can read the elements of the stars. We know that when they get too heavy, when we get to the heavy elements into iron, that that's when stars expand and explode. That's how the matter gets scattered. That's where the iron in the
Okay,
core of
that's
the Earth comes from.
that's
I
that's
mean,
a that's a theory though, right?
what do you think a theory is?
Well, you have a hypothesis and you think, well, this is how something might want to go, and then you start trying to disprove it, and then that's called a theory when you start doing tests. And if you cannot disprove it, then it becomes a law.
Okay, that's not quite accurate.
Okay,
So, can you are you able to Google?
sure.
Can you Google the law of gravity? What's the law of gravity?
The law of gravity.
It's a formula, and this isn't a trick question, right? This is the law of gravity is a formula. It's a mathematical equation. The theory of gravity is what you just described as a law. Just like germ theory is still a theory, and plate tectonics is still a theory.
Hmm.
Cell theory, all of these are still just theories. That doesn't mean that we don't know what gravity is. That we don't
Yeah, but
know how. You know,
oh no, no,
it's
we don't know what gravity is, but we have not been able to disprove it to the point. There's Scott. There's nothing that we have absolute knowledge of. Everything is true, justified belief. You agree with that? We don't have perfect
sort of.
knowledge of anything.
Sure.
So in the scientific method, though, you have a scale where you call something a law is because it has been rigorously tested and we have not been able to disprove it. Do you say that there's no such thing as the law of gravity? That's a lie?
No, no, I don't say
Okay.
that. The law of gravity is that formula that I just had you look up.
And we test it right now. We test it regularly scientifically. But when you're talking about something that happened in the past, you're doing hypothesizing and you have theories, but you don't know that like the level that you would know like the law of gravity.
We do absolutely.
Okay. So here's my problem. How is it that stars give rise to teleology? Because they're impersonal. This is why your theory falls apart. I can disprove it just right now.
How do stars give rise to stars? Didn't give rise to teleology, to having a purpose. They didn't. We
That's
Those
right.
two things are completely unrelated. Other
That's
than
right.
we're dependent on
So then
the
the
sun
stars
to.
didn't give rise to us then.
That's not the same thing. The stars didn't have to mean to give us a purpose for us to. We're also. This is assuming that we have a purpose. Our
No, no.
existence has a
All I'm saying is
purpose.
that we're purposeful beings. Are you trying to save the phenomena of existence with your life?
Am I what? I'm sorry. Say that again.
That's Plato. Plato said that the goal of all philosophy is to save the phenomena of existence. Are you seeking salvation for yourself when you eat breakfast in the morning?
I suppose, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm trying to not starve, if that's what you're. Yeah,
Okay. Everybody does. We
sure.
all act like existence is very special and holy. Okay. And so why are you doing that if it doesn't really matter and if there's no such thing as purpose?
I guess I find this hard to answer because it feels like a completely unnecessary question. It doesn't. Why do I need to have a purpose? What's wrong with me just waking up and enjoying breakfast and going about my day and doing whatever I do? I mean,
Okay,
I don't.
you're waking up and having breakfast, enjoying what you do is purpose. You purpose to do that, right?
Sometimes
And and
some.
and you are very worried when somebody comes and is a mass murderer in your neighborhood, right?
Sure, I would be. Yeah.
Because they're destroying the sanctity of existence. They're destroying your ability to save the phenomena of existence. And so you pass laws. You vote for people to pass laws to put that man in jail.
But none of this means that we couldn't have come from the stars. That the
Well,
sun
you
didn't
agree
give way to the
that
solar
rocks
system.
don't create philosophical societies, right?
Sure, but we are
And
not
stars
rocks.
don't create philosophical societies,
No, but we are not rocks or stars.
right? But you say we came from stars.
We did.
Okay, so you don't see the inconsistency there?
There's no inconsistency there. We're not rocks and we're not
Can
stars. We
stars
don't.
give rise to philosophical societies?
In the case that you're saying it now, I suppose yes, because here we are. I mean, it
Oh,
doesn't
oh,
have.
yeah, that's just a just so story. It's not reasonable. It's unreasonable, but it works for your narrative, so you are willing to twist reality in order to affirm it.
How is it unreasonable? We came from the stars, and
Do
we are
rocks
in the.
create philosophical societies?
Are we rocks?
No, I'm just saying, generally speaking, do rocks create philosophical societies?
No, but people do.
Do rocks create humans?
No.
Okay. Do stars create philosophical societies?
I mean,
Are they
not in the
personal?
way that it seems like you're saying no.
Okay. Do stars create humans?
Sort of, not exactly. That's not quite how it works,
Okay.
but
If so, then do stars create humans? Humans create philosophical societies, but stars do not create philosophical societies. Do you see the inconsistency there?
and that's why I said I guess sure, but not quite like the way that you're saying it. That's just not how it works. Like
Okay, help
the
me out.
stars didn't make us. Just like what's another example I could use? If my wife, if my son, we made our son, right? If my son learns to fly, my wife didn't create flight.
Okay.
That's the argument you're using right now, is that my wife can't create flight, so she couldn't have created my son.
What do you mean by fly?
If he learns to fly around like Superman, if he figures out whatever trick of physics that he needs to have some ability to fly around like Superman, if he was to figure that out, that's not something that my wife could have done.
Well, no, your wife did have the capacity for it. She just didn't figure it out, right?
Right? So did my wife create flight, or did my
Well,
son?
your wife had the virtual capacity, not actual, but the virtual capacity to fly, and your son just was able to figure out that trick. So the more apt question is,
Did my
can
wife create flight?
no, your son created flight, but your wife
Right.
had the latent potential for flight. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. In that case,
Okay,
but
so
she's also a
that doesn't
thinking
apply to
being.
our. I'm sorry. Go
Why?
ahead.
She's also a. Yeah, I mean, I'm using an analogy. She's
And
obviously
it
a
doesn't
thinking
work.
being and not an inanimate object like a star.
Right. So a more apt would say, can a rock create a philosophical society?
Why is that more apt? Rocks aren't thinking beings. Like you're saying, my analogy
And
doesn't
stars
work.
aren't thinking beings either.
Sure, which is why I said no when you asked it the first time, and then you kind of the context was a little different when you asked it the second time. That's why I used my analogy.
Yeah, but your analogy fails because your analogy, stars don't have the capacity to be philosophical.
Right. They
And
don't have any
your
firing
wife has the
neurons.
capacity to fly. If it is something, it's not something that your son, that your wife did not have the latent capacity for.
I'll,
It's a
I'll
category
I'll
error.
I'll think of how to rework the analogy, but I don't want us to get stuck in a rut here either.
Okay.
I so okay. Would you say that you don't agree that? Okay, where do you think humans come from? Let's start with that. Let's go.
I would say that all contingent being had to be created by a self-existent creator. And if it were not for his agency and his efficiency, we would not be. So for some people say, oh yeah, if God were to remove his hand from everything, everything would fall apart. That's not true. If God were to remove his hand from contingent being, we would just cease to be. Because we are dependent upon his agency and his power in order to have the power of being. Contingent being can't make itself, and it must be by the agency. If the fact is going to be personal, which we are personal, then the cause must also have the capacity for personal teleology or purpose, intentionality.
I don't know if that's true. I feel like that's making a huge assumption.
What is the assumption?
You're assuming that the cause has to have a purpose.
Well, I'm reasoning that the cause. No, I'm reasoning that I have purpose. I'm to modus ponens. I'm looking at what I have, okay, and then I'm logically deducing what must be in order for me to have that capacity. It's
Why
a
must
necessarily
that be?
logical argument. It's not an evidence. It's a
But
proof.
but it's not necessary. Why could we not come from something with no purpose?
Because rocks do not create. We could make this the
Right.
topic of our thing. Rocks
Okay.
do not create philosophical societies.
Right. But that's not what we're talking about.
We are philosophical beings, right?
Sure.
Okay. And so rocks cannot give birth to the purpose that humans have because it doesn't have that capacity.
But no one's saying that they did. I didn't say that rocks made a
You're saying that
philosophical society.
impersonality gives rise to personality, or unintentionality intends intention. It's a violation of law of identity.
I didn't say that.
Was there ever a time when a universe, in your view, was entirely unintentional? Because you agree that intentionality exists right now, right? You're intending to have this conversation.
We are intending to. Yes, that's not
Okay.
the same thing as the universe. And
Are you part of the
you keep
universe?
kind of. Yes, I'm part of the universe.
So the universe, at least some part, is intentional, right?
No, that's like saying I have cancer in my liver, so I am cancer. That's
You are a being that instantiates cancer, yes.
yes, there is a piece of me that has cancer. That doesn't make me cancer.
But
That doesn't.
the universe
So
is a personal type of entity in some capacity.
I don't know if I would call the universe an entity.
What would you call it?
I mean, it's a thing. It's a place. It's a very, very large room
Okay. Well, it's
full
a
of
something.
everything. Yeah, it's a
And so that something, at least in part, is defined as intentional.
I disagree with that. That's an
So it's
assumption.
there are only two categories. Either it's intentional or unintentional. And if it's unintentional, then you're not intentional.
That's not true. That's
If
just not
if you say
necessarily
it's
true.
part, I'm not saying everything is intentional. I just said rocks cannot create philosophical societies. I am saying though it has that attribute of intentionality within it.
Right, but that doesn't make it intentional. just like that doesn't make me cancer.
I'm not saying everything is intentional. I am saying that the universe has this attribute, at least in some degree. I'm not saying it's one thing. I'm saying it's many things. Okay, but it is defined as being, at least in some degree, as being intentional because you are part of it.
So then I am defined as cancer because otherwise I couldn't have cancer.
You are defined as having the attribute of cancerousness. Okay? And so I could say that the universe instantiates cancer. It is defined in some degree by having that reality of cancer.
It's not really defined by it, it just has it.
Well, it is a definitional attribute. Would you agree with that?
It can be.
Okay, and you're not saying everything is cancer, right?
No.
Okay, that's what
And
I'm saying.
just
with
like I'm not saying everything is. Well, I said the universe doesn't have to be in intentional, and you said then we can't be either. And there's no that doesn't follow.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
When I said that the universe was not necessarily intentional, you said if it's not, then we can't be intentional either, because how does that work? And I said that's when I brought up the cancer analogy, which again, not a perfect analogy, but that doesn't follow. The universe can be unintentional and we can still be intentional. There's
okay,
no.
So how does intentionality obtain in an unintentional universe? That's my question.
I mean, the short answer of that would be abiogenesis followed by evolution, as we best understand it.
Okay, that's just a just so story. You're not not giving a reason. You're just saying flying spaghetti monster.
You asked how that happened, and that's how that happened.
Abiogenesis just means that just says like I could say, I always say Sally Struthers, poor Sally Struthers, but I always say, yeah, Sally Struthers. You're just making a term to say, red, blue, junk, fly garage doors. Therefore, we have intentionality. That's all you did.
Okay, but you know that's not what abiogenesis means or is.
What does abiogenesis mean?
It's life coming from non-life.
Okay, and how does that happen? That's the greatest question that you have, the greatest challenge you have on your side that's never been answered.
Sure, we don't know every piece of the puzzle, absolutely.
And that's the whole question, though. Abiogenesis
how is
says,
that the whole
you're just
question?
saying it just happened. And this is the only answer I've ever gotten from people that are atheists. They always say, it's evolution did it. It's like, that's not an answer, because evolution has no purpose. There's no efficient cause.
It doesn't have to. Why does it have to have a purpose?
Because you are purposing to say that.
That doesn't mean that evolution has a purpose, though. Like you keep implying that, not even implying. You keep saying that because I have purpose, or because I have a purpose to, I'm being purposeful in this moment, that evolution had to have a purpose, and that just doesn't follow.
So evolution is impersonal, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, how does it instantiate or obtain the attribute of intentionality when it is unintentional? By definition,
it doesn't. Evolution doesn't
obtain. It's just
intentionality.
magic. It's like a rabbit out of a hat without the magician and without the hat. Poof! It just happens.
No, it's not like that at all. I actually am pretty well studied in evolution. If you want to have that conversation, I'd be happy to.
Well, I'm just challenging your assumptions, my friend. That's how we learn, by challenge.
Yeah, I have no problem saying that. We as a species don't have the full understanding of abiogenesis. We don't have every piece of the puzzle, absolutely, but we have most of the pieces.
We don't have the beginning of it. It's the greatest mystery of the naturalist paradigm.
What do you mean we don't have the beginning of it?
We haven't even begun. You guys haven't even begun to answer that. How do you get life from non-life?
That's not true at all. Hold on, let me pull up some stuff. Absolutely. It's been done in labs. We have gotten the.
Are you talking about the Urey experiment? The Urey, what's his name?
Yeah, in the jar.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been repeated many times.
No,
if you know what we're talking about, then that's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
You
th- th-
cannot.
I mean, that,
Essentially, what you're saying, Scott, is that unintentionality gives rise. Non-purposefulness is giving rise to purpose unintentionally. It does it by accident. Is not a very exact term because accident means that you intended something. But just for the sake of argument, you could say it accidentally made purpose.
no,
But that's a violation of the law of identity.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, and I'm trying to be careful of my phrasing here, that how you just phrased that statement itself is kind of nonsense. In the same way that when someone talks about, well, what happened before the Big Bang, before was a thing, but before time started,
Mm-hmm.
what happened before that, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't
Do you
follow.
believe time had a beginning?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Stephen Hawking said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Do you know what time is?
That's depending on if you're going space time or philosophical, or I mean that can be a very loaded question.
Would it be fair to say that we understand time by watching and measuring the movement of contingent matter as it relates to itself? For example, atomic clocks. We measure the electrons around a cesium atom, or planetary clocks. We look at the relationship of the heavenly bodies as they move, toward each other. That's how we understand time. In other words, it's a measurement of change.
Yeah, yes and no. I understand why you would phrase it like that, and I don't completely disagree. I mean, time is that's a long
There
conversation. That's
can
a
be
big.
more to it because it's like gravity. We really don't know for sure what it is, but we experience it that way, and that's how we describe it.
Well, it's actually really funny that you say that it's like gravity, because that's. I mean, that now we're getting into theory of relativity, space time. I mean, that's where it really starts to, especially trying to bring philosophy into it, starts to get really complicated really quickly. So the answer to what is time, I mean, it's like asking my 2-year-old to explain what a camera is. He can look at something and know, hey, that's a camera. That doesn't mean he can explain
Sure.
the camera, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
so it's.
But time had a beginning, and so before time, there had to be a state of pure actuality.
But that right there, before time, is a problematic phrase.
Well, it's an
What does that
analogical
mean?
language. In other words, it's not exact, but it is a way that we can. It can give us a concept. Surely there's an element of mystery there, but at the same time, we know that if time had a beginning, there has to be some set outside of that time which is being, because it didn't make itself. The Big Bang. Are you familiar with the law of inertia? Bodies at rest
Sure.
tend to stay at rest, and we had a Big Bang that happened. All of the universe was compacted into this infinitesimal small point, and something acted upon it outside of it that caused it to move. Right now, we're hurtling through space as we're exploding right now, and entropy is increasing, and someday it's going to collapse. Um,
Why is it
what was it that moved
necessary?
it?
Why is it necessary that it was something outside of it? Could have been something internal. And see, that's the
Okay,
thing is,
then you're saying it's
I'm
self-created.
comfortable saying not self-created, but
Bodies at
why?
rest tend to stay at rest unless acted upon by what?
Okay, but it's not quite at rest. That's not quite an appropriate way to describe that. When we put pressure on things,
Did
they get
something
hot.
act upon the Big Bang to make it bang? Did it bang? Will you
We
say that
I,
it banged?
Actually no. That's definitely a misnomer.
So
I
that
would call
wasn't.
it
So we're not the product of an explosion right now as we're hurtling
not,
through space.
we are hurtling through space, but it wasn't an explosion. It was everything spreading in all directions at once.
Like an explosion, just like an explosion.
It it's fine if you want to call it that, but technically that's not what it is. It's I
And
I'm
it
not
was
the
it
person
was
to
at some
explain
point
it.
at a steady state, right?
We I don't know. And I'm
Well,
comfortable saying that I don't know.
okay, but it went from a position of not exploding to exploding in movement.
It seems that way, yes.
Okay, and it could not have. It would have, if the law of inertia is correct, it had to stay at a state of steady state unless acted upon by an outside force.
Well, it has to be acted upon by a force. It doesn't have to be specifically outside. An
So you don't
internal
believe in the law of
force.
inertia then?
I do. Doesn't have to necessarily be if I cook a grenade and throw a grenade and it explodes, there's force from inside. That external force doesn't mean outside the grenade. The explosion can still come from within. The inside force inside
but you had
the
to
grenade.
make it, pull the pin, and throw it.
But the explosion is not caused by me. It's caused by the detonator on the inside of the grenade.
No, no, the detonator was made by you.
The detonator was made by. See, but now you're jumping right back into this philosophical. Technically, I'm the one who pulled it. Like that's not what causes the explosion. Like
the grenade
the
didn't make itself, right?
No, the grenade didn't make itself.
Okay.
But the grenade doesn't explode if I just throw it.
When you made the grenade, were you in a position of actually being?
Okay, well, now we're getting back into this. Okay, when a grenade explodes, there's a fuse. You pull the spoon, the fuse lights. It comes down to a detonator. This is very, as basic as I can make this. It comes down to a detonator, some kind of primer. It explodes, it ignites the main explosive, and the shrapnel and the shockwave travel. In that interaction, the thing, what is the thing that caused the shrapnel to fly in all directions? What is the reaction, the action reaction, the physics of it?
Well, you said that the fuse burns down, lights the primer, and ignites the explosive.
Okay. And as the explosion happens, what's the action and reaction?
I don't know what you mean. I mean, it explodes and it interacts with its environment wherever it is.
Okay. The primer ignites, starts to expand, and it's that chemical reaction, the ignition of the primer, which then ignites the main explosive, which then sends the shrapnel, right? So right. It's not me standing over there. Like, yes, I pulled the pen so that it would explode, but the physical chemical reaction that's happening is what leads to the shockwave, what leads to the explosion.
Right. And there's let's say the igniting force itself had to be actually hot. That's a necessary condition, not a sufficient condition, and it had to have the properties that it did in order to do that. And it had to be actually that thing, that whatever it is, that has the causal ability to light the explosive to get it to explode. So actuality giving rise to potentiality, because the powder is potentially explosive, but it's not actually explosive. Do you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay. So you've got again a proper understanding of causal relationships, because you know it's not pudding inside of the grenade that is causing explosion. It is that which has the actual capacity for explosive power, and it has to be acted upon by something outside of itself that has the capacity to bring causal relationships. So yes, we'll take you out of the picture as the guy that threw it. It still doesn't really matter, because you've got the relationships of movement of these things that have that capacity within itself to bring about the cause of the explosion. And
right, but the physics of that has nothing to do with me. It's independent of me. The physics of.
But that doesn't really matter.
The reason, but it does, because you said that something had to cause. It had to be an external force, and that's why I said, right. Well, it could actually be internal. That's why I used this analogy.
Okay, but you're just making a grenade as if somehow it's a simple unity. It's not. It's a complex. It's a composite material that is put together. It's made up of several things. And so the
It's an
powder,
analogy.
yeah, but the powder has the outside force of the fuse and the primer igniting it. Do you see that causal relationships? And it's something outside
Sure.
of itself that is causing it. Now, because you have it packaged together, it doesn't really matter.
That's not the cause and effect you were talking about. You were talking about the laws of physics, Newton's laws of physics. That was what you brought up. And
Uh-huh.
so the physical cause of the shrapnel flying everywhere is not me throwing the grenade. It's the explosion inside.
Sure. No, I have no problem with that. But it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, but you're still saying that there's something outside of whatever it is that in the causal chain, there's something actual outside of itself that's bringing the potential, that's moving the thing that it's acting upon from a state of potentiality to actuality. It goes dunk, 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 and it has to be actual outside of itself, moving something that has a potential for something to that state of actuality. It's the law of inertia is not being violated at all in the grenade, even if you take yourself out of the picture, even if you're just talking about pure physics.
Right. So then why does that not work for the Big Bang? Why is it
Because
necessary that something acted on it? It couldn't have.
if it's at a steady state and it exploded, then something actual that is animate.
Something happened.
This
Sure.
is Aristotle's, first called the first mover. There must be,
Sure.
if there's movement, there must be the first mover. And so if we see motion, there must be something that actually is animated, it would be pure actuality of animation that gives rise to motion at all.
And why could that not? I mean, I can think of 50 things right now that could have been the wrong molecules bumping up next to each other and moving in a weird direction,
Yeah,
and
but
then starts a chain reaction. I mean,
but do you agree that the molecules are contingent?
no,
Well, they're not
not the way
self-existent.
you're using that.
They are an effect. They're contingent.
Why?
Molecules are acted
Why-
upon.
why are-
and
why are they
they
an
are moved
effect?
to a new state of existence by something outside of
They
itself.
can be. I mean, we're talking about a hot soup. It's not even
Does that
not even
hot soup
quarks.
change? Does everything within that hot soup change? Is it moved? Does it move? And is it acted upon by other things that make it change?
Sort of. I mean, in a sense, yes. In a sense, no. I mean, I'm made up of a million atoms, which are made up of quarks, which are made. I mean, you can break it down a million ways, and in that sense, no, everything's exactly the same as it always was, just arranged slightly differently.
Then it's not the same.
But it is. A quark is a quark. Well,
Yes, but
the quark hasn't changed.
But
It doesn't matter what it's in.
You
It's still a
believe
quark.
matter energy is a changing phenomenon, though, right?
It can, sure. I mean, but that's not really at that level. We're getting more into molecules, into. I mean, that's
Well, then it's
way.
not self-existent.
That's just a huge leap. Yeah, you haven't demonstrated that.
Yes, I have. I've said it over and over and over. Okay, listen, Scott. I got to get going. I got a bunch of chores I got to do before I go to bed.
Okay.
But you have been a wonderful interlocutor. I tell you what, I literally, it's almost impossible to find people who have conversations anymore. I don't know why. And the ones that I get are not generally very smart, but you're very intelligent. And the thing I like about the way that you interact is that you are, you'll grant a point. You say, yeah, sure. Sometimes people, what they'll do is they'll, what do you call that? They'll filibuster with talking. They'll just start talking and talking and talking. They won't let me say a word because they don't know what to say. And it's finally I have to just give up and say, okay, I'll see you later. Thanks. You haven't been like that. We're having a conversation here. We're thoughtfully testing each other's points and ideas. And I think that's how growth happens. And that's how we can both grow and learn. And you do it in a very charitable way. So thank you for that. That was an enjoyable conversation for me.
No, and I would be super down to do it again. I'd prefer a little more prep next time. I'd want to have a topic or something, some more notes, to be able to actually. I just sat down and we kind of started.
That's the only way I do it. I don't do well with preparation.
Okay.
I'm very extemporaneous. I play social media like WWE too. I like to taunt people but unfortunately It's funny because atheists have this really dry sense of humor, but then when they get challenged, they suddenly get all like Mary Poppins or something and offended.
No,
But
I
anyway,
never. I'm always down for a talk.
okay. Well, I appreciate it, Scott. It's very nice talking to you. It's nice to meet you, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yep, you as well. I'll
All
talk
right.
to you
Thank
later.
you. All right. We'll see you.